Alright everybody, so to begin canning our broth, I have a 9021 All-American pressure canner. It has several features. Of course, naturally you can see that it is completely made out of aluminum. Don't let that scare you. It's very durable. We have wing nuts right here and the bolts that are attached to it. We have one of the shelves that comes with the unit. I have a second one right here that we can use. It has a pressure gauge, a vent hole, and an automatic vent regulator for the pressure. And as you can see, I'll zoom in, it has 5, 10, and 15 on it, and that has to do everything with the amount of altitude that you have, because if you have, say here where I live, it's over 1,200 feet in altitude, so I would be required, according to the website for the National Preservation of Food, I'd have to use a number 15 pressure, which means this pressure gauge has to come up to 15 psi in order to properly can my food of any kind. Now there's a couple things that we have to check before we begin to can. So first of all, we have to make sure that the pressure gauge is okay. There doesn't seem to be any issues with it. It's not loose. We're going to have to turn it over and look at a couple things first. Right here is the vent. We have to make sure it is clean and clear and there's no obstructions in it in order for us to can our food without any incident. We have this hole here is for the pressure gauge itself, and here is an emergency blow feature for this canner, and that's when these are not working properly. Second of all, you'll see a latch here and a latch here. These will be hooking on to one of these to ensure that it is properly closed. Now there's a couple other things that I need to tell you about my pressure canner. Because it's a 921, the fluid capacity for this particular model is 21.5. It is approximately 12 5/8 diameter in inches. The inside height is 10.5 inches, and it weighs pretty good. It weighs about 24 pounds. Now the capacity for this particular unit is 19 pint jars, 7 quart jars, let's see here, cans, about 35 cans if you use cans. It's pretty large and will handle a good deal of jars inside in order to pressure can. Now this unit, because it has 2 shelves, what you can do is you can put pint jars or some quart jars and maybe I don't know, a small jar, really small jar. And then what you can do is you can place this lid on top, and you can have a second row of food to be canned. And that usually happens like when you're using pint jars. Usually you can make 2 top and bottom rows. Okay, so now that we have talked about the pressure canner that I own, I'm going to talk to you about this next item that is extremely important and crucial for anyone who is doing any type of canning, whether it's water bath or pressure canning. Now, I use the National Center for Home Food Preservation. This website is fantastic. You can find it at nchfp.aga.edu. And this is a really good website. It'll show you how to can, freeze, dehydrate your food, smoke, cure, ferment, pickle, how to store your food, and how you make jellies and jams. Well, right now we are only interested in canning, so I'm going to click on canning and bring up the second page. So on this particular page, it's talking about your canning. It'll give you general information, and then on the bullets it'll have, well, what is it that you want to do? So we are interested in preparing and canning poultry, red meats, and seafoods. And we're going to click on that and have it bring up the next page. Now it'll do a brief description as to what they recommend, and then it'll have a list of poultry, meats, and seafoods. It'll tell you exactly what you need to do. All you have to do is click on the bullet, and it will send you to the next page. We're interested in chicken or turkey stock, so I'm going to click on that and allow the website to move to the next page. Now on here it'll talk about selecting, preparing, and canning your meat. And it'll also talk about broth. And right now it'll have 2 tables. Now, being the fact that I live over 1,200 feet in altitude, it is important that you have to take really close look at what you're doing. Now, I'm going down to table 2, and it'll have the style of pack, the jar size you're using, the process time, anything that's below 1,000 feet, and everything that's above 1,000 feet. The first table goes into a little bit more detail, and it too has the style of pack, the jar size, the process time, and then it goes into much more important details for anybody who's in elevation above 1,000 feet. So I'm going to be using my quart jars. So we know that the process time is going to be 25 minutes. I live above 1,000 feet, so I have to have 15 pounds of pressure. Now, I highly suggest that everyone, when they're doing anything with regards to food preservation, check this website out. It is important. They give you a lot of information, and it is extremely helpful. Well, good morning, everybody. As you saw, we made our bone broth yesterday. So today we are going to can our bone broth to save it for future use. Now, one of the first things you're going to need is a pressure canner, because this has to be pressure canned. It can't be water bath canned. And you're going to need some canning salt and your measuring spoons. In each one of these quart jars, we are going to put 1 teaspoon of salt. And in the smaller one, we're going to put 1/2 teaspoon. Now, everybody's probably thinking, well, that's a lot of salt. Not really. It's just enough to preserve the liquid while it's under pressure canning method. So we'll bring you back when we got everything set up and we're ready to start. Okay, as you see, our can lids are boiling now, so now we can take them out and put them on our jars. They're completely sterilized, ready to go in, as well as our jars. apologize for the stain because I have to make sure that they're completely sterilized. A little bit of the sterilized water goes in to the broth. It's not a big deal. Oops. Now we're going to take our rings, we're going to put them in the water and allow them to become sterilized. And then we will put those on, and then our jars are ready to be prepared to be canned. Okay, now that we have our lids on, we're going to take our rings and we're going to place them on the mason jar and make them finger tight only. And we're going to do that with the same as with the pint that we have here. And as soon as I get my canner out, we'll get it prepared, we'll bring it out, show you, and we'll continue with our canning process. Okay, so like I said, we're going to take a little bit of oil and we're going to put it around the rim, the inside rim of the pressure canner to make sure that it stays lubricated and there's a good seal on it. Just need a little bit. And then we are going to start the pressure canner by adding in our broth. Now here's the turkey broth that I'm putting in. I'll put those in next to each other. And then we'll put in our chicken stock next to that. Now this pressure canner it'll handle 7 jars, a little bit over 7 jars on it. That will ensure that we can get it safely taken care of. And then if I want to add an additional layer, which I'm going to do, you just take the additional layer thing and we're going to place it on top of the other jars, and then we could put another jar on here if we wanted to, but there's not enough room, so we're just going to leave this one off, and then we're going to move these back around so that they're not touching too much on each other, and the one is directly in the middle. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to add in our lid. And there you see there's a hook here on this side and a hook on this side. And those will clamp on to the side handles. And we want to close it up. Sorry about that, I did it a bit wrong. Close it up just like that. Now we're going to take each one of the toggles and we are going to opposite sides bring the toggles up and just barely have them touching each other, clamped down. All at the same time, we are keeping an eye on the spacing between the bottom and the top lid to make sure that it's even, and then we're going to tighten, finger tight, opposite sides until it's completely tight. The next thing we can do is we're going to turn this onto an 8 on our dial here, and we're going to bring it up to temperature, and I will bring you back. Now, one side note here, remember I told you I was over 1,000 feet on my elevation. Actually, I'm 1,200 feet over that. So I am required to use 15 for my pressure. Now, when this starts to come up to temperature and it's venting, we got a lot of air coming out of this vent, we're going to wait for about about 2 minutes, about a minute, actually, 1 minute. And then we are going to place the toggle jiggler on top of the vent. That'll force the pressure gauge to come up to temperature, and we want it to be at about 15 pounds per square inch on the gauge. And then we start, once that the jiggler starts to move, we are going to turn the heat down so that this jiggles only about 4 to 6 times per minute. As you can see, it is starting to vent. As you see the condensation on my microwave. And we're going to allow this to vent for at least 1 full minute. And then we'll put the jiggler on 15 because I have an altitude over 1,200 feet. And then our process time will start once the jiggler jiggles the first time. And then because of the National Registry for Canning and Home Preservation for Food, our process time will be 25 minutes after the first of the jiggles that are seen here. Once it starts jiggling, we're going to turn this down to around 6. Because I've done this so many times before, I know exactly where to set my temperature on my stove. And then we'll wait and count 25 minutes. Now we're vented for approximately 1 minute. And now we're going to put the jiggler on 15, as you can see here. And then we're going to put it right on to thing. Now what this will do is it will bring the pressure up on the gauge. Once the gauge reaches approximately 15 pounds or 250 degrees, we can turn our temperature down to 6. And once this starts jiggling here, we start our timer for 25 minutes. As you can see, I have already set my timer on the microwave to count down 25 minutes. Now, the pressure canner is almost to 15 psi, and when the 15 psi, it reaches 15 psi, this will start to jiggle. Now I'm going to turn this down to approximately a little bit before 6. I don't want the pressure canner to go any higher than 15 psi. Okay, as you can see, our pressure is completely down. What we're going to do now is we're going to remove this to start venting. Take the remaining pressure off of the pressure canner. And as soon as this stops venting, we'll open it up and take our jars out. Okay, everything is completely vented. I'm going to pull it forward a little bit. You have to be very careful because this is hot. And what we're going to do is we're going to untighten the toggles until they fall on opposite sides of the pressure canner. And now we are going to open it up. Now we're going to unscrew it counterclockwise. We're going to raise the lid away from us so that we don't get a steam burn. This is safety related and everybody should take note of that. Okay, the next item you're going to need is a bottle holder, jar holder, and you're going to go in and you're going to pull it out with the lid just like this, straight up, and we're going to move it to the table where we have something down so that the jars do not touch a cold surface. try to remove some of the water that's on top, because we don't want it to force the lids down. We want them to pop, and it'll have a popping sound when it seals. We want to make sure that it seals tightly. Right now this one hasn't popped, that one hasn't popped, this one hasn't popped, this one hasn't popped. But you can hear it, it'll just go boop, boop. That, see, just did it now. So there you are. So that's how you can. And now we just sit here and allow them to cool and to finish sealing. And this is how you can your fresh homemade broths. Have a good day and hope to see you in the next video. Bye-bye now.